morning. It's Stacy, and we are walking in my shoes this morning. We're kind of on the road, mobile, so I have Carl with me this morning. So excuse the bumpiness of the video. But today we're talking about boundaries. We're going to keep going on that from the caregiver's perspective and establishing boundaries. And yesterday we talked about creating that boundary that's like a fence. And there's certain things that we're accountable for, and there's certain things that we're not accountable for. And this is kind of a tough thing because also often when I talk to other spouses and partners, we talk about, well, you're always asking me to change. You're always saying I need to be the one to change. What is he doing? What you're going to find, or what is she doing? What you're going to find is when we start making that change and creating our boundaries, we're going to be able to be way more in control of us, our life, and our action. So this is just not to do with us dealing with our veteran. This is just us dealing with life as a whole. So what is your boundary? How do you choose what that boundary is this morning? You know, we have that we have to know what we're accountable for and what other people are accountable for. So you have to think about things like feelings. And you cannot let your feelings determine your boundary. Because when we're happy, we can let other things in that don't necessarily need to be there. And when we're angry, we can push things away that do need to be within our boundary. So, by letting your feelings control what is in and what is not in your boundary, it's going to create a problem. So we don't want to be doing that. We want to not let our feelings take over. And that is so hard. I fail at this all the time. I'm sure Carl's over there nodding his head like, yep, can you practice what you preach?
That the other night.
He does say that a lot the other night. You have to take ownership for your feelings. Nobody else can own your feelings. Those are your feelings. So I have this horrible habit of looking at Carl and saying, what's wrong? What can I do to fix it? I can't fix it. They're his feelings. They're his emotion. And he has to work that out, just like I have to work out mine when I'm having mine. Can we vent to each other? Yes. But can I own his feelings? No. Can he own my feelings? Absolutely not. The next big thing we deal with is attitude and belief. We all have different beliefs. We all have things that we truly believe in our heart. I believe things that Carl doesn't believe. I believe things my parents don't believe. I believe things my children don't believe. They're entitled to their beliefs. I'm entitled to my belief. And I can't let the other person bring their beliefs and influence my belief, my core belief. We see that a lot when we get around a group of people and they're complaining or they're moaning or they're bitching. I saw it a lot in support groups that people who used to be positive in these groups, now somebody brought something negative, and now all of a sudden their attitude became negative and their belief changed, or their attitude towards that belief changed. So you have to own your belief. You have to accept that that is your belief. You also have to accept your attitude. And our attitudes are influenced by so many different things that we have. For example, my past and everything that happened to me in my past creates my attitude. Am I in a good mood? Am I in a bad mood? Do I have bad memories and past track records of things that have happened that create me having an attitude? I have to let that go And that's my ownership. That's not Carl's ownership. That's mine. You know, he's had experiences in his life that create a negative attitude towards certain things. And so he has to that's his attitude. And he's the one who owns it. But it doesn't necessarily have to be my attitude. So that's another form of creating and establishing these boundaries. These boundaries that we have to create are so important about learning ownership of what's ours and what's not ours. You know, behaviors have consequences. And this is so hard, and it sucks. And it's one of the hardest things for me to deal with, is that my behavior has a consequence. It is so easy for me to say, well, they made me do it, or I felt like I had to do it, or this happened. I can remember my daddy saying when I was growing up, if everybody else jumped off of a cliff, are you going to do it too? No. I mean, if I choose to jump off the cliff, I own that behavior. The guy who jumped off the cliff with me doesn't. The friends who taunted me into jumping off the cliff, they don't own that behavior. I own that behavior. So you have to become very aware that your behavior has its own set of consequences. Go back to eating right and exercising. The statistics prove that if you eat right and you exercise, you're going to be healthier. That's just one of the things that happen. And we choose to do that at times, and we choose not to do that at times. So when we don't exercise, and then we can't understand why we don't have the endurance, that's on us. That's our behavior. You know, act loving towards others. That's tough. When you're mad at somebody, it's hard to act loving towards them. Well, that's who we are. Again, we have to own that. Our loving that is going to be important. Y'all bear with me while I'm talking to Carl about where we're going. You're going to go through this light and past the Ace Hardware and then turn left. So, sorry.
Co-pilot.
Yeah, it is what it is. When we act hateful, what kind of behavior are we going to get in return? When we act spiteful, what kind of attitude are we getting in return? And I see that all the time when Carl and I argue. If I push his button, then he turns around and pushes my button, and we give the impression that button pushing is okay. We do that with our kids. How do you expect your kids not to holler when all you do is scream? So our behavior and what we do and what we're giving out is directly reflective on what we get back. So I'm not saying you shouldn't disagree with people. I'm not saying that you shouldn't not agree with them, but you cannot agree with them in a loving manner. And that is on us. If we always give out negative, we're always going to get negative in return. So again, that's in our boundaries. Hang on one second. See that blue building with the white doors way up there? There's a road there. You're going to turn right before it. Sorry. Trying to give directions why we're doing this at the same time. The yelling, the constant yelling that we all tend to do. We yell a lot sometimes, and I know from our personal experiences that if I yell, he's going to yell back. And it just becomes this humongous fight where it involves yelling. And so we have to be super careful when we do this. If we don't want to be yelled at, don't yell back. So, or don't yell first. because it just escalates, and that's something we can do. It should be right here. First place on the first trailer on the right. That's not a trailer.
This is Morgan, not Paloma.
This is Paloma. I'm almost positive.
I read the sign, huh?
Oh, now I'm like have him lost. So, you're probably right because this is not the road I think I'm on.
Get tired of saying you've been right.
Yeah, well, Paloma should be that road behind us. Sorry, I'm getting us very lost, and he's gonna love us. Now you have to look at being an enabler. We can so be an enabler at times, and we do this often.
No, that's more.
I was married at some point. My very first marriage was to a horrible addict. Well, what did I do? I allowed that to happen. I covered for him. I did that all the time. And by doing that, by covering for him, I enabled that to go on. And so we can't do that either. We can't. It's the next road down. There's another road just on the other side of this. Sorry. We can't enable people either. Also, often I listen to them. Well, he's an alcoholic. Okay, he may be an alcoholic. You're not the alcoholic. He is. She is. So that ownership is on them. It's not your ownership to have. So when you set those boundaries about what is and isn't good for you, that's important. It's really important that we understand and set those boundaries. This is blown. Sorry, I got him lost. So those are things that we just have to take into account when we're doing our behaviors, choices. We have to take ownership of our own choices. What choice did we make? What choice did we do today? Where are we at in our choice? And so that becomes a major issue. Did we choose to do something? I know for me, overeating is a big deal. Y'all know I've had surgery. And so if I eat too much, should be right there.
Got it.
If I eat too much, I become, if I eat too much, I get sick. And that ownership is on me. So we have to make those choices ourselves. And we're accountable for our own choices. Sorry, now I'm not as distracted because we're where we need to be. So you have to forgive me today. We tend to, when we're having bad choices, to say, well, they did this. Or they did that. My spouse did this, or my neighbor did this, and that's what caused me to make this bad choice. Well, if mom wouldn't have cooked so much pie, I wouldn't have ate so much. If my nana wasn't such a good cook, I wouldn't have done so much. And so those are all choices that we make, and we can't put them on anybody else. You have to take responsibility for your own choices every day. Again, we're back to the values thing. We're placed value so often on the wrong things. We place our value on the wrong stuff. So when we look at things like value and where value comes into play, values are a big deal. So what do we value? Do we value a clean house? Is that a value that we have? Do we value our time on Facebook? Is that a big issue for us? Is that something that we put on as a priority? Do we value checking our emails on a regular basis? Is that something that we do? Do we value things? I know that Carl and I have gotten into it a lot over, this is my house. This is my couch. This is my bed. And so I place this value on it being mine, when in reality it's our house, our home, our bed, our furniture. And so we look at the value of stuff, and we don't value the relationships we have. Who cares if your house is messy, if it means you can spend an evening on the couch holding hands with your veteran? Which is more important? The dishes that are rinsed and sitting in the sink, and sitting on the couch spending an hour watching TV holding hands with your veteran? Or is the value on making sure those dishes get in the dishwasher? Where's our value? Is our value on hearing that little alarm go off on our phone that there's a message on Facebook and we have to check that message immediately? Because, the world will come to an end if we don't check our Facebook message or a messenger. Or is the value on putting your phone on silent and playing a card game as a family? So where's our value? Those are values that when we set our boundaries, we have to determine. I'm not saying that your value can't be on putting the dishes away. If that is more important to you than sitting on the couch and watching TV with your veteran, or going for a walk, or sitting on the porch with them, or playing cards as a family, or having family time, or whatever, if that's more important to you, that's your value. You own that. You own that completely. So those are the kind of things that we look at when it comes to creating value. Limits. Limits are another big issue that we have. It's okay to say no to others. We are so afraid sometimes to say no, because we're afraid that if we say no to people, that we're going to offend them. Well, we might not make them happy at that moment, and that's okay, but at what cost? If we say no to somebody because it's going to overtax our time, or because it's just something we can't do, or because it's going to put us in a situation, if we say no to them, and that's what we say to them, but we allow it for ourselves, then that's on us. That becomes our issue. That becomes us. That doesn't become them. So what if they get mad when we say no? If it's a real relationship and a real value, it's okay to say that. I used to think that one of my dearest friends in the world is Renee. I've known her forever, and we've gotten in a whole lot of trouble together in our childhood days. But I used to think that if Renee called me, I absolutely had to answer the phone. And I used to think that if I called Renee, she absolutely had to answer the phone. Well, I learned quickly, especially when she'd been married for a while, and they lived apart in different states due to jobs. When they moved to the same state, Renee didn't always answer the phone. She may have been having a glass of wine with Jeff, or may have been on the beach. And it was okay for her to say, no, hit that little auto reply button. Because if it was a true emergency, I would have texted her back and said, this is a real emergency, call me now. And she would have. But it's okay to say no. It's okay to create that boundary that says, I'm not letting people in my space at this time. You're not allowed to cross my fence. When it's appropriate, I'll open that gate for you. So we have to create that boundary while we're doing this. It's important that we do this. Our thoughts. Our thoughts are our thoughts. Our thoughts are not the thought of somebody else. They're ours. Own them. If we think a certain way, we have that right. If our spouse thinks another way, he has that right. It's how we bring our two thoughts together and learn that compromise that's important. But you don't have to allow somebody else's thought into your life. You don't have to allow that thought to come into you. That is them. That is completely on them. So those are the things we have to learn as we're setting and creating our boundaries. What is important? Where do we go with our boundaries? It's okay to not let other people's thoughts into our lives. That's my boundary. I'm drawing the line here. You know, we don't have to fight over those boundaries with them. I don't have to fight with that boundary. I don't have to fight with their thought. My boundary says, I'm not dealing with this. Your thought is yours. My thought is mine. We can agree to disagree. You know, there's so much hate going on in this world today. And the screaming and the hate mongering comes from people trying to force their belief on something else. Carl and I get into it all the time over COVID. Is it real? Is it not real? Is it this? Is it not this? He has his thought and his opinion of it, and I have mine. I mean, there's issues, and I'm not bringing my politics in, but do I think it's a real virus? Yes. Do I think that the numbers may have been skewed? Absolutely. But is it killing people? Yes. It has killed personal friends of mine who are healthcare workers. So yes, it is real. His opinion is different than that. But it doesn't mean that he's bad or that I'm bad. It means that my thought and my opinion on that subject is mine and his is his, and we have to respect that. And we don't always do that. Most of my life, I have been told that perception is reality. How people perceive you is the reality. Let me just back this up and say, perception is not reality. That is a hard thing to swallow. Perception is not reality. That's probably the hardest thing I've had to overcome, because for so long I was taught perception is reality. How people perceive you is what's real. No, how people perceive you is their opinion of you. Perception is clouded also often by people's past experiences, by people's past lives, by other things that have happened to them. And I'll give you an example. In Carl's other relationship, he was cheated on. So one day I didn't answer the phone. And I didn't answer the phone when I was out because I was on my way home, and I was less than a mile from the house. And so my thought was, I'll be there by the time I answer the phone, right? Well, when we got uptight over this, and it became a discussion that elevated past that or escalated past that, he said something, and I said, I was just at the corner store. Well, remember, he had a relationship where somebody cheated on him. So he had been told, and I didn't know this, by that person, I'm just running to the store. So when I said I was just at the corner store when you called, and I didn't answer because I'm almost home, his mind immediately raced to that past experience. One thing we say to each other all the time is, I'm not your ex-wife, and he says, I'm not your ex-husband. Because the way we treat each other sometimes, or we react to each other sometimes, is based on that relationship with my ex-husband and his ex-wife. That's where those experiences come from. Who people think we are is not necessarily who we are. Who people think we are is not necessarily who we are. The only person we have to be accountable to is ourselves. And if you believe that in God, you have to be accountable to Him. But again, that is your opinion, your choice. My belief is my belief. Your belief is your belief. But the only people we have to be accountable to in our life is ourselves. When we're here on this earth, I don't have to be accountable for how I feel to anybody else. Do I have to be accountable to what I do at work? Yes. Do I have to be accountable to pay my bills? Yes. Are those my personal accountabilities? Yes. I mean, those are just things we're accountable to. But we chose to be accountable to that when we took that job. We chose to be accountable to pay a mortgage when we bought our house. We chose to be accountable to pay a car payment when we bought our car. So that form of accountability is on us. That's just the way it works. Communication is another massive thing in this perception that we have. Huge issue here. I am not a mind reader. I may be a lot of things, and I may think I am way more than what I am, but I am not a mind reader. Carl is not a mind reader. He is the love of my life and the most amazing man ever, but he cannot read my mind. If anybody could read my convoluted mind, God bless you, but he can't. So I find that when we're communicating and in our boundary issues, I'll be doing something and we're talking about a subject, and then I get off of that subject because he'll tell you I'm like a pinball and I go everywhere. And then he asks me a question and I'm about 3 things ahead of where he's at, and I'm answering the question to the 3 things ahead, and he's confused, and then he gets mad and he thinks it's deception, but it's not, because I'm 3 things ahead. Or I'll ask him, like the other night, he said, plate or a bowl. Well, I'm thinking, oh, okay, you're going to fix my dinner. No, that isn't what was said. He wanted to know if I wanted a plate or a bowl. That was all he said. But because we weren't communicating well and we weren't talking about everything, it created this conflict over something stupid like a plate or a bowl. So communication, it is up to us to clearly communicate what we want and what our needs are. What we want and what our needs are, that communication is on us. We have to be the one to make that communication happen. No one knows what we're thinking other than us. Nobody can know what we're thinking other than us. So that is critically important when we're trying to set our boundaries and communicate. How do you know what people expect if you don't communicate about what they expect? How do you know what you expect others to do if you're not clear in what you're talking about? I can remember one day when I was little, girl, I never got in so much trouble my entire life as the day my brother said, "Pass me the salt." Okay, we're at the dinner table. I picked up the salt shaker. I drew back and I passed it like a football to my brother. Let's just say my daddy was not too happy. I think I ate the next week in the bathroom. But I did what my brother said. He said, "Pass me the salt." So I did that. And my dad had a fit. But I did what he said. I was being smart, a smart aleck, but I did what my brother asked. Seth, my youngest one, when I was potty training him and he was the world's worst, I came in the hallway and there was, an inch of water on the floor. And realized it was coming out of the toilet. And here's Seth walking around. So I call the maintenance guy and he comes and he snakes the toilet and he pulls out a pair of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle underwear. And I looked at Seth and I said, "Christian Seth," and you know when you say two words together, it's always a bad thing. "What is this?" And he looks up at me with these innocent eyes and he goes, "Poo-poo goes in the potty." And I couldn't even get mad. He had had an accident in his Mutant Ninja Turtle underwear and he flushed it down the toilet because that's where I told him poo-poo went. Communication. We have to be clear in what we're saying because others don't interpret it the same way. I know this has been kind of like, let's just sit back and see where we can go with this. And a lot of times y'all feel like she keeps telling me to change me. I'm not telling you to change you. What I'm telling you is by changing how we do things and creating boundaries, we're going to have a way more positive outlook in life. Things will be so much better for us. Things will be better in our relationship. Things will be better with our veteran. Things will be better, just period, when we learn to create these boundaries and what we're accountable for and what we're not. And the one thing we truly have to understand is that PTSD is theirs. They didn't choose it, they have it. We didn't choose it either, but we did choose to love them. So when we establish boundaries and we establish what we're willing to let cross over and what we're not, and we talked about this yesterday, there are moments that are theirs that they have to carry what's in their backpack. And then there are moments in their PTSD moments that explode and we have to help them. We can't carry it for them, but we have to help them. And that's how this works. I'm Stacy. We're Loving My Veteran. This will be posted to the group page as soon as I figure out how to do it from the mobile. It'll also be on our YouTube channel. Please go to Behind the Service podcast in just a few minutes. It'll be in the next half an hour. And join Shauna and Libby and Aaron and the rest of us for coffee, conversation, and collaboration. It is a Zoom thing and it is on their website, their Facebook page. So please go there and log in and we hope to see you there. Have a blessed day.